I wrote a song called Delete and Fast Forward, and I think that's where we're at now. We have to just kind of forget it. You can't do anything about what happened over here. You can't do anything about what's going to happen tomorrow. The only thing we can do anything about is right now. And so if we live that way, we'll do something. It's kind of philosophy that I can't do anything about what happened yesterday or what's going to happen tomorrow. But I feel like I'm full control of what's going on now.
Longevity.
Well, I think worry will make you sick. I've never seen it accomplish anything. I've never seen worrying about anything change it. So I decided not to do it. If you can't do anything about it, why the hell worry about it? Every negative thought you have releases poison into your system and will kill you or give you cancer or tumors or whatever else you can think of. So if you're thinking negative about anything, erase that. A negative thought will kill you. So if you're even thinking negative, you've got to change that first. It ain't easy. Once you think it's easy, then you're in trouble. I have abused my lungs quite a bit in the past, so breathing is a little more difficult these days. And I have to be careful. I've mistreated myself since I was this big. You know, I started out smoking cedar bark, and went from that to cigarettes or whatever. And that almost killed me. I don't smoke anymore. I take better care of myself today than I did then. I used to smoke 2 or 3 packs of cigarettes a day and drink whatever there was there to drink, you know. And I had pneumonia 4 or 5 times. My lung collapsed. I almost died. So I said, wait a minute, you know, I ain't getting that high off them Chesterfields. Yeah, yeah.
I covered the White House, and I was reading about how in 1979 you went to the White House.
Yeah.
You know what I'm about to tell?
Yeah, and smoked a joint on the roof of the White House. Me and Chips Carter.
To President Carter's son.
Yeah, we had a ball.
Whose idea was it to go to the roof?
I think it was his. I'm going to blame him for it anyway. But of course, it had to be a lot of his because he was the only one who knew how to get up there.
Whose idea was it to smoke?
Oh, both of us.
But you took a joint to the White House.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of iconic. You know
or
that,
something.
Right? Maybe illegal back then, but also iconic.
Very illegal.
At 92 years old, Willie Nelson has faced more heartbreak than most could ever imagine. He's buried close friends, lost fortunes, and watched his biggest dreams go up in flames. Now, in what could be his final chapter, he's dropping a truth so shocking it leaves everyone silent. When someone asked him about death, Willie didn't even blink. No hesitation, no fear. He just said it straight, his words slicing through all the fake smiles and shallow talk with raw honesty. But how did this country outlaw become so calm about facing the end?
What was the low point for you?
Well, there's been some, low points. When I lost my son, that was a big one. And, everything else seems to pale in comparison. I got through that one, so I figure anything else, if you get through that, you can get through anything.
Right. That's what you learned from that.
It's all about the same thing, about now. How are things now? You look okay, I look okay, you folks are all right. Why bitch about anything?
The answer hides deep in a life filled with pain most folks couldn't handle. Willie's walked through storms of loss, betrayal, and heartbreak that would have crushed anyone else. This isn't some polished, sugar-coated tale about a country legend. It's the unfiltered truth of a man who's seen everything he loved slip through his fingers. It's about a soul who learned that real courage isn't always about fighting to stay alive. Sometimes it's about knowing when to let go and finding peace in that truth. Willie's journey toward that moment of acceptance didn't start on a stage or in the spotlight. It began long before anyone knew his name, back when he was just a man chasing music, love, and a place to belong. It all began in the dry dust and struggle of Depression-era Texas, where a little boy learned his first harsh truth about being left behind. Willie Hugh Nelson was born on April 29, 1933, in the tiny town of Abbott, Texas. And from his very first memories, life seemed determined to remind him that nothing and no one lasts forever. His parents, Merle and Ira Nelson, were dreamers with hearts too big for their small town. When those dreams started calling them somewhere else, they made a choice that would change Willie's entire view of the world. At just 6 years old, he stood there watching his mother walk away, leaving him and his sister Bobby with their grandparents, saying she'd be back when things got better. But those better days never came. His father soon remarried and moved on, starting a new family, while Willie was left behind to wonder what he'd done wrong. Why wasn't he worth staying for? That kind of pain doesn't just fade, it burns deep, leaving scars that never really heal. He once admitted, "I used to drink a lot. I used to smoke a lot of cigarettes." You can feel the ache in those words. It's the sound of someone who learned early that love can disappear in a heartbeat. His grandparents, William and Nancy Smothers, tried their best to fill that emptiness. They wrapped him in kindness, taught him music, and gave him his first guitar when he was just 6. But even their love couldn't quiet that voice in his head, asking the same question over and over. Why wasn't he enough to make his parents stay? Under the blazing Texas sun, little Willie worked long days in the cotton fields beside migrant workers. His tiny hands would split open and bleed as he picked cotton in the heat that could break a grown man. Still, he kept going, learning early that life doesn't stop for pain. "Don't feel too bad about it," he'd say later, "you'll just go crazy." But through all that pain, Willie learned something powerful: how to endure. He figured out how to keep pushing forward, even when quitting seemed like the easiest way out. Music became his lifeline, the one thing that didn't leave him. At just 7 years old, he wrote his first song. It was rough, simple, but every note carried the kind of emotion a kid could never say out loud. By the time he turned 10, he was already playing with a local group called the Bohemian Polka. The moment he stepped on stage, something shifted inside him. The heartbreak didn't matter anymore. The crowd didn't walk away. They cheered. They wanted him there. That feeling was like a spark in his soul, a reminder that maybe, just maybe, he did belong somewhere. But even as the music gave him peace, the scars of being abandoned never fully disappeared. Willie grew up knowing one hard truth: people leave, promises break, and depending on anyone but yourself can tear you apart. When asked about family values, he once said, "There's 3." But behind that short answer was a lifetime of lessons about trust, loss, and survival. That painful wisdom turned out to be his secret weapon in the cutthroat world of the music business. He understood something most people never do: that clinging too tightly, even to life itself, can trap you in chains you can't see. The little boy who once picked cotton in blistering heat, who was left behind by those who should have loved him most, had already learned the truth: real freedom doesn't come from what you have, it comes from having nothing left to lose. By the early 1960s, Willie Nelson thought he'd finally found love, or at least something that looked like it. He married Martha Matthews, and together they built what seemed like a dream life. 3 kids, Lana, Susie, and Billy, filled their home with laughter and chaos, the kind that makes a house feel alive. Willie was chasing stardom in Nashville, the beating heart of country music, writing songs that would soon become timeless hits. But dreams don't always pay the bills. Even though his songs were being recorded by big names like Patsy Cline, Willie himself was barely scraping by. He took on every odd job he could find, selling encyclopedias door to door, pumping gas, doing whatever it took just to keep food on the table. Imagine that: the man who'd one day become a multimillionaire was, back then, counting loose change for groceries and sleeping on friends' couches. Martha started losing patience with the struggle. She'd married a man chasing stars, but what she got was a house full of overdue bills and empty cupboards. The small arguments started stacking up: missed opportunities, unpaid rent, broken promises, until every word turned into a fight. Willie would come home from another failed audition only to be met with Martha's cold stare and sharp words waiting like a trap ready to spring. The tension began to break something inside him. That free spirit who once believed music could fix anything started sinking into despair. He turned to the bottle, drowning his frustration and pain in whiskey, trying to forget the feeling of failure that haunted him every night. Martha's anger only made things worse. It became a mirror reflecting everything he hated about himself. Here was a man who could write songs that made the whole world cry, yet he couldn't make the woman he loved smile. Then came one brutal winter night when everything fell apart. The bills were stacked high, the rejection letters never stopped coming, and Martha's words that night, sharp, unforgiving, cut deeper than any knife ever could. Willie stumbled out into the freezing Nashville night, so drunk he could barely stay on his feet. The cold bit through his clothes as he wandered the empty streets, drowning in heartbreak and whiskey. Then, in his lowest, darkest moment, he made a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. He laid himself down right in the middle of the road, staring up at the black sky, silently wishing for the pain to just stop. The asphalt felt like ice against his back. and he closed his eyes, waiting for headlights to end it all. Cars flew past, horns blaring, drivers yelling curses, but none hit him. None brought the peace he thought he wanted so badly. He stayed there for what felt like forever, shivering, realizing something gut-wrenching, that sometimes the most desperate act a person can make isn't brave at all. It's surrender. When he finally stumbled back home, broken and numb, Martha was waiting, but there was no comfort in her voice, no softness in her eyes. Instead of a helping hand, she gave him ultimatums. Instead of understanding, she handed him a list of everything he'd done wrong. Their marriage, though still standing on paper, was already gone. And Willie knew it deep down. He'd learned another brutal truth, that love can turn sharp, that the people closest to you can cut the deepest. The man who would one day sing heartbreak into every note was discovering firsthand that some pain runs too deep for any song to heal. Then came December 25, 1991, a day that should have been full of joy for the Nelson family. Christmas morning, gifts under the tree, grandchildren laughing and running through the house. But fate had something far darker waiting that day. Instead of being a day filled with joy, that Christmas became the one that would haunt Willie Nelson for the rest of his life. Willie Nelson, Willie's eldest son, had been fighting silent battles for years, ones no spotlight could ever chase away. Being Willie Nelson's son in Texas wasn't just a name, it was a weight. Everywhere Billy went, people expected him to be a mirror image of his father. The same charm, the same voice, the same easy smile that made Willie a legend. But behind that pressure, Billy was falling apart inside, crushed under expectations he never asked for. Depression had wrapped around him like a snake, squeezing tighter every year. He had his father's tender heart, that deep sensitivity, but he didn't have the same outlet to turn his pain into songs that healed. Willie could pour heartbreak into his music and somehow find peace. But Billy, he just felt broken. The pills didn't lift the fog, the therapy didn't reach his soul, and the endless comparisons only made the darkness heavier. Willie's sister Bobby later revealed that the family had been closer than ever that Christmas morning. They were planning something special, recording a gospel album together, father and son side by side, sharing their faith and their music. The studio time was booked, the songs were picked. It seemed like they'd found a path back to each other through the one thing that always held Willie steady: music. But while everyone was preparing for a new beginning, Billy had already made his final decision. The pain had grown too sharp, the darkness too complete. On Christmas Day, while homes across America were filled with laughter, food, and the sound of wrapping paper, Billy quietly chose to end his story. He was just 33 years old, the same age as Christ when he died, a detail that would haunt Willie forever. The phone call came that afternoon. Willie was getting ready for another family celebration when the words hit him like a sledgehammer to the chest. His firstborn son, the boy who carried not only his name but his dreams, was gone. Not from an accident, not from sickness, but from a choice his father could never understand and could never undo. That day shattered something inside Willie that would never fully heal. The funeral was pure heartbreak, a blur of whispered conversations and silent stares. People spoke in soft, careful tones about Billy's struggles, about the impossible weight of being Willie Nelson's son, about all the warning signs everyone wished they'd noticed sooner. But through it all, Willie sat frozen, lost in silence, his mind replaying every memory, every word he wished he could take back, every moment he could have said something different. Bobby Nelson, Willie's sister, his lifelong partner in music and spirit, watched her brother crumble in a way she had never seen before. They had faced it all together. Broken hearts, long nights on the road, moments of glory and despair. But this loss, this was different. This wasn't something you could sing your way through or heal with a melody. This kind of pain didn't fade, it rewrote who you were. Willie and Bobby never sat down to talk deeply about Billy's death. There were no heart-to-heart confessions, no long talks about grief or moving on. Instead, their silence became a bond of its own, a quiet understanding between two people who knew that some pain can't be explained, only felt. Bobby once said that it was just Willie's way to feel everything deeply but rarely speak about the things that hurt the most. Losing his son had taught him something both terrible and profound about suffering. "It's my life," Willie would say quietly, not in defiance but in acceptance of the scars that life had carved into him. He came to understand a truth most people never want to face. Some pain doesn't make you stronger, it just makes you different. Some losses don't ever heal, they simply settle inside you, becoming part of who you are. And sometimes, the deepest act of love isn't holding on, it's understanding why someone might choose to let go. But while Willie was still drowning in grief over losing Billy, another storm was already forming behind the scenes, one that would tear apart everything he had worked for. For years, people he trusted were quietly making choices that would lead to a disaster big enough to nearly destroy Willie Nelson's entire world. The Internal Revenue Service wasn't just watching Willie Nelson. They were waiting, calculating, ready to strike with a blow so heavy it would make every personal loss he'd ever suffered feel small in comparison. In 1990, just 1 year before Billy's death, IRS agents stormed Willie's properties with stacks of seizure notices in hand. The number they dropped was beyond belief: $32 million in unpaid taxes. It wasn't just a big bill, it was one of the largest tax debts in American history. No one could wrap their head around how one man could owe that much. But the truth was ugly. Willie's business managers had been playing dangerous games with his money, cutting corners, chasing bad investments, and skipping out on the government's cut. And now the reckoning had arrived. The seizure was ruthless. Agents took everything: his gold records that marked decades of blood, sweat, and glory, his piano where he'd written some of his most soulful songs, even his beloved Texas ranch, the one place that had ever truly felt like home. They cleaned him out completely, even taking his personal keepsakes, treating him like a criminal instead of a living legend who'd given the world some of its most iconic music. Friends, lawyers, and advisors begged him to take the easy way out, to file for bankruptcy, wipe the slate clean, and protect his future earnings. It was the smart move, the strategic decision any business mind would have made. But Willie wasn't built that way. He flat out refused, and his reason said everything about who he really was. He told them, plain and simple, he wasn't about to file bankruptcy if it meant the people he owed would get cheated out of their money. That was the outlaw spirit in him, rough, proud, and stubborn as ever. Instead of running, he decided to face it head on. He promised to pay every penny back, no matter how long it took. Then came the wildest twist of all. Willie turned his debt into art. He released an album titled The IRS Tapes Who'll Buy My Memories, with every cent going straight to the government. He even auctioned off his own possessions, watching strangers place bids on the artifacts of his life: gold records, guitars, and pieces of his past, all to pay off the price of loyalty and principle. Willie hit the road like a man on a mission, touring non-stop, playing every small-town stage, dusty fairground, and dive bar that would have him. He took any paying gig, no matter how humble, determined to chip away at that mountain of debt. The irony wasn't lost on him. The same man who spent decades singing about freedom and living wild was now working for the very system he'd always rebelled against. Every single dollar he earned went straight to the government. Every show, every encore, every handshake after the lights went down, it was all just another payment on a debt that felt endless. But Willie didn't stop. He kept performing, kept smiling, kept pushing forward with a fire that left everyone around him in awe. The man had lost almost everything, yet somehow he never lost his drive or his heart. That financial nightmare ended up teaching Willie one of the biggest lessons of his life. He realized that losing your possessions doesn't destroy you, it strips you down to what really matters. The fancy houses, the ranch, the gold records, they were just stuff. What truly mattered was something nobody could ever take away: his music, his spirit, and his gift for touching people's hearts with a single song. That was his real fortune. By 1993, through pure grit and endless nights on the road, Willie had done the impossible. He'd paid off every last cent of that $32 million debt, but the experience left its mark. He came out of it with a new understanding that everything in life can vanish in an instant. Fame, money, even stability, they're all temporary. He learned that clinging too tightly to anything, even success, even life itself, only brings pain. The man who had buried his son and lost his fortune had finally uncovered a deeper truth. The key to surviving this world isn't about holding on for dear life, it's about knowing when to let go. Willie Nelson was never like other country stars, and this chapter proved it. His courage to stand tall through controversy and loss made him unforgettable, but that same honesty and defiance would soon earn him powerful enemies in an industry that liked its heroes safe, quiet, and predictable. While most country singers kept their mouths shut to protect their image, Willie Nelson never played that game. He spoke his mind loud and clear, no matter the cost. His bold takes on politics, human rights, and social justice didn't just ruffle feathers, they set the whole nest on fire. He lost radio play, fans, and industry support, but he didn't care. Every word, every stance showed exactly who he was: a man who refused to fake it for fame. In the late 1960s, when racial tensions were blazing and country music stages were almost entirely segregated, Willie pulled off a move that stunned everyone across the South. During a concert in Texas, in front of a mostly white crowd, Willie walked over to black country singer Charlie Pride and kissed him right on the lips. The crowd gasped. Some shouted in anger, but Willie didn't flinch. It wasn't a stunt, it was a statement. He was telling the world that friendship, loyalty, and respect were bigger than skin color. That single moment of defiance hit like a lightning bolt. The backlash came fast and fierce. Southern radio stations banned his songs, concert promoters canceled shows, and hate mail flooded in by the truckload. But Willie never backed down. No apologies, no regrets. He kept standing beside Charlie Pride and every other artist who'd been shut out because of prejudice. Willie made it clear that hatred had no home in his heart or his music. It was a costly stand, but one that defined him. He'd already lost too much in life to start compromising now. He believed some values were worth more than fame, more than chart-topping hits, more than comfort. As the years rolled on, his activism only grew louder. While most country stars stayed safely conservative, Willie proudly supported liberal voices, throwing his weight behind candidates like Dennis Kucinich and Beto O'Rourke. He played benefit concerts for Democrats, spoke openly against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and used his songs as weapons of peace, unity, and truth. Willie Nelson wasn't just a country legend. He was a rebel with a conscience, unafraid to stand alone if it meant standing for what was right. A lot of Willie Nelson's conservative fans felt flat-out betrayed. They accused him of turning his back on the values that made him famous, claiming he'd abandoned his roots. But Willie didn't see it that way. Not at all. In his eyes, he was staying true to the real lessons his grandparents had drilled into him since childhood. Stand up for the underdog, and never be afraid to speak truth to power. That was his kind of country honor. And if that ruffled feathers, so be it. Because Willie wasn't just talking, he was living it. One of his boldest stances was his lifelong fight for marijuana legalization, back when most people still whispered the word weed like it was a crime. Long before it became cool or mainstream, Willie was wide open about his cannabis use and the peace it brought him. He got arrested multiple times, faced courtrooms and fines, even risked jail, but he never backed down. Then came the story that turned into pure legend. Willie once admitted to smoking a joint on the roof of the White House during Jimmy Carter's presidency. It sounded wild, but it was true. That one act of rebellion became one of the most talked about tales in both music and political circles, adding another layer to the outlaw myth that followed him everywhere. But the moment that really made traditional country fans lose their minds came years later. In 2006, Willie dropped a cheeky little song called "Cowboys Are Frequently Secretly Fond of Each Other," a tune about gay cowboys released long before most of country music or America was ready to hear it. The song was playful but bold, poking fun at the tough guy cowboy image and reminding folks that love doesn't fit inside stereotypes. The backlash was instant and fierce. Conservative fans demanded boycotts, radio stations banned the song, and critics acted like Willie had committed country music's biggest sin. But he didn't care, he just kept singing his truth. Then in 2018, Willie went even further with one of his most political songs yet, "Vote Him Out." Dropping right in the middle of a heated election season, the song called on Americans to use their votes to create change. It didn't name names, but everyone knew exactly what message he was sending. Willie wasn't just strumming a guitar, he was still stirring up the world, one song at a time. The release of "Vote Him Out" hit like a thunderclap. The timing and message were impossible to miss. Everyone knew exactly who Willie was calling out: the Trump administration. The reaction split his fan base straight down the middle. Some longtime fans praised his courage for standing up, while others were furious, burning his albums and swearing they'd never play his music again. But Willie didn't blink. He'd rather lose listeners than lose himself. Through all the outrage, Willie lived by one simple rule: he'd rather be honest and hated than popular and fake. He knew full well that his choices would cost him money, fans, radio support, but silence, that was never an option. To him, music wasn't just background noise. It was supposed to wake people up, shake their hearts, and make them feel something real. Every controversy, every headline taught Willie one powerful truth about courage. Real bravery isn't about charging into danger, it's about standing up and telling the truth when everyone else wants you to keep quiet. It's about picking principles over paychecks, integrity over image, and truth over comfort. And sometimes being brave means standing completely alone with only your voice to back you up. But that same voice, The one that had carried him through heartbreak, fame, and revolution was starting to turn against him. For a man whose entire life revolved around his singing, his lungs were becoming his greatest enemy. The cruel twist, the very thing he once credited with saving his life, smoking marijuana, was also slowly breaking down the organs he needed most to survive. His lung problems didn't start overnight, though. They'd been creeping up for years, long before his cannabis use became legendary. Back in 1981, during what should have been a peaceful family getaway in Maui, everything went wrong. Willie had been swimming in those perfect Hawaiian waters when suddenly his chest tightened and a sharp pain shot through him. It felt like being stabbed from the inside. Something had gone terribly wrong. Whether it was the water pressure, the salt, or just terrible luck, Willie's left lung collapsed. He was rushed to the hospital, gasping for air, every breath feeling like fire. That terrifying moment was only the beginning of a long, painful battle with his lungs. Decades of heavy cigarette smoking, mixed with constant marijuana use, had left deep scars inside his body. For a man who'd spent his life singing about freedom, losing his ability to breathe freely was the cruelest twist of all. Willie Nelson's battle with his health took a dark turn when he was diagnosed with emphysema, a brutal lung disease that turns every breath into a fight. The man who once commanded stages for hours singing his heart out under the bright lights was suddenly struggling just to walk across a room without gasping for air. Every inhale felt like climbing a mountain with no end in sight. Pneumonia became his constant enemy, hitting him again and again 4, sometimes 5 times over the years, each round leaving his lungs weaker, scarred, and less able to keep up with the life he loved so much. Friends, family, and bandmates watched helplessly as the once unstoppable performer began to fade before their eyes. His voice lost its power, his body lost its stamina, but his spirit, that never quit. By 2015, things had gotten desperate. Willie could barely perform, and the doctors told him straight if he didn't do something drastic, his singing days were over. So he took a leap of faith and agreed to an experimental stem cell surgery. Doctors carefully extracted stem cells from other parts of his body and injected them directly into his damaged lungs, hoping the cells would rebuild what years of smoking and illness had destroyed. It wasn't an easy choice. The surgery meant canceling entire tours. Thousands of fans left heartbroken after buying tickets to see the living legend. But Willie knew this wasn't about fame anymore. It was about survival. His doctors warned him that without intervention, he might never step back on stage again. The recovery was slow, painful, and filled with uncertainty. No one could promise the treatment would even work, but Willie fought through it with the same quiet grit that had carried him through every storm of his life. Then came the scariest test of all in 2022, when Willie was pushing 90 years old. COVID-19 found its way onto his tour bus in Nashville. The virus that had claimed millions of lives hit him like a freight train. For anyone, it was dangerous. But for a man with lungs already damaged and fragile, it was potentially a death sentence. The world held its breath, praying the outlaw who'd survived everything else would somehow find a way to survive this too. When Willie Nelson woke up in the middle of the night gasping for air, his wife Annie D'Angelo, his fourth wife, and the true love of his life, didn't waste a single second. The rapid test confirmed their worst fear. Willie had caught COVID-19. For a man with already fragile lungs, it was the nightmare they'd prayed would never come. Annie snapped into action like a force of nature. She turned their home into a full-blown medical center overnight, ordering mobile treatment units, setting up monitors and calling in every doctor and specialist she could find. She gave him everything within reach: Paxlovid, monoclonal antibodies, steroids, nebulizer treatments, you name it. Every moment mattered, and she refused to leave his side, watching his chest rise and fall like it might stop at any second. For days, Willie's life hung by a thread. His body, already battered from decades of lung problems, was under attack from a virus built to destroy what little strength he had left. Annie later said those nights felt endless, watching Willie fight for every breath, never knowing if the next one would come. The man who had survived heartbreak, financial ruin, and decades of loss was now battling his toughest enemy yet, his own failing body. And somehow, against every odd, he pulled through. Slowly but surely, the treatments began to work. His strength crept back, his breathing steadied, and the unbreakable outlaw spirit inside him refused to give up. By sheer willpower and Annie's relentless care, Willie came back from the edge of death. But the experience left him changed. Deeply, permanently changed. He'd looked death straight in the face and felt his own body shutting down, breath by breath, strength fading with every second. There were no bright lights or grand moments, just exhaustion and surrender. That's when Willie learned one of life's hardest truths. Dying isn't always poetic or dramatic. Sometimes it's simply running out of breath. That realization shifted everything for him. The man who'd once feared loss and endings discovered that death itself wasn't something to fear. It was just another part of life's long, winding road. Another change in a life that had already been full of them. Now when Willie talks about not being afraid of death, you can feel that truth behind his words. His scars, his struggles, and especially his lung battles. They all gave him a peace most people spend their whole lives chasing. Willie Nelson has already felt what dying is like. The slow fading of strength, the body quietly shutting down, the breath coming harder each time until the fight itself feels pointless. Through it all, he's come to see death in a new light. It's not the real enemy. Suffering is. Sometimes letting go isn't weakness, it's mercy. Accepting the end, he's realized, can be the kindest gift you give yourself when there's nothing left to fight for. In the vast, storied world of country music legends, Willie Nelson now stands as something both powerful and heartbreaking, the last man standing. He's the lone survivor of a brotherhood that once shook the music world to its core. The Highwaymen, a supergroup made up of 4 unstoppable icons: Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, and Kris Kristofferson. Together they redefined what it meant to be outlaw country, rough, fearless, and real to the bone. But time, as always, took its toll. One by one, the legends began to fade away, leaving Willie with only memories of the men who'd shared his fire, his laughter, and his stage. Johnny Cash, the man in black, was the first to go. His passing in 2003 left a wound that country music still hasn't healed. Willie watched with deep sorrow as his friend and collaborator battled diabetes and respiratory failure. Seeing Johnny, once so strong and commanding, brought low by something as human as failing lungs, it hit Willie hard. Even in those final days, Johnny's spirit stayed fierce, his eyes burning with the same fire that had defined his entire life. Then came Waylon Jennings' turn in 2002. Diabetes complications finally took down the outlaw who'd walked shoulder to shoulder with Willie through some of the wildest years in country music. Waylon wasn't just a friend, he was family. They'd written songs, played endless nights on the road, and shared the kind of bond that only brothers in struggle could understand. Losing Waylon wasn't just losing a partner, it was losing a piece of his soul. And then, most recently, in September 2024, the world said goodbye to Kris Kristofferson at 88 years old. Kris was Willie's equal in every way, a poet, a thinker, a songwriter who could turn heartache into art like no one else. They'd shared stages, traded verses, and lived through the same storms. His passing marked the end of an era that will never come again. Now Willie sits alone with their memories, the last highwayman carrying the weight of a generation that taught the world what real music and real rebellion sounded like. Kris Kristofferson's death struck Willie Nelson harder than anyone could have imagined. Kris had been the youngest of the highwaymen, the one they all believed would outlive the rest, the one who'd keep the torch burning when the others were gone. But fate had other plans. Instead, Willie found himself standing at yet another funeral, saying goodbye to yet another brother, another chapter of his own life closing right before his eyes. As he stood there, surrounded by silence and memories, Willie began to understand something painfully profound about survival. Being the last one standing isn't a triumph, it's a heavy burden. Every funeral, every folded flag, every empty stage reminded him that his time too was slipping away. Each goodbye felt like a preview of his own final act, a whisper from the universe reminding him that nobody escapes the clock forever. But with that sorrow came wisdom. Watching his friends fade taught Willie a hard truth about legacy and about letting go. When he spoke about Kris's passing, his words carried a quiet grace. He said that Kris had left behind a treasure chest of songs for the rest of them to sing, for as long as we're here. That phrase, for as long as we're here, cut deep. It wasn't just reflection, it was acceptance. Willie knew the sands were running low. He was living on borrowed time, playing out the final notes of a long, wild melody. Still, watching his friends go gave him a different kind of peace. He realized that dying didn't have to be tragic, it could be noble. Each of the highwaymen faced the end with quiet courage. Johnny Cash kept performing until his voice cracked and his hands trembled, refusing to let illness silence his soul. Waylon Jennings kept recording, fighting through pain just to make more music, because that's what he was born to do. And Kris Kristofferson, ever the poet, remained sharp and creative until the very end, still writing, still dreaming, still alive in spirit long after his body began to fade. Through it all, Willie began to see death not as something that happens to you, but as something that unfolds around you. Life keeps taking pieces, friends, lovers, chances, until one day, it's finally your turn. But instead of fearing that truth, Willie learned to meet it with calm. To him, mortality wasn't a monster in the dark anymore, it was simply the rhythm of existence. And until his song runs out, he's determined to keep playing it loud, proud, and unafraid. Watching the people he loved most fade away taught Willie Nelson one of life's hardest lessons, that the fear of death is often worse than death itself. It's the waiting, the dread, the desperate grip we keep on life that causes the real pain. When you finally stop fighting and accept what's coming, something incredible happens. The suffering eases. Willie's peace with mortality isn't dark or depressing, it's clear-eyed and real. He's seen what happens when you fight the inevitable, and he's seen the quiet beauty that comes from finally letting go. His friends didn't leave this world in vain. Their final moments became his teachers, showing him how to live without fear and how to face the end with the kind of dignity most people never find. Now when Willie walks out under those bright stage lights, he doesn't just sing for himself, he carries the voices of every fallen highwayman beside him. Every lyric, every chord, every trembling note is a tribute to the brothers he's lost. Each concert is both a celebration and a goodbye, a living reminder that their songs still breathe through him. He's no longer just Willie Nelson, the man, the outlaw, the legend. He's the keeper of something sacred, a legacy built on rebellion, truth, and heartache. He knows that when he finally takes his last bow, part of that legacy will fade with him. But that thought doesn't fill him with sadness, it fills him with gratitude. He feels honored to have been the one left to carry their stories, to sing their songs, to keep their fire alive just a little longer. And when his time finally comes, Willie won't meet death with fear. He'll greet it like an old friend. He'll walk into that final encore ready to rejoin the band with a lifetime of songs and memories to share. The last highwayman isn't lonely, he's fulfilled. He's seen the full circle of life and learned to embrace it with open arms. At 92, Willie Nelson has earned something rare, complete honesty about life and death. His acceptance isn't born from despair or defeat, it's carved from experience, from every heartbreak, loss, and second chance he's lived through. He's been abandoned, betrayed, bankrupt, and broken. He's buried his son, lost his fortune, and watched his own body fail him. Yet somehow, through all of it, he's found peace. Willie's revelation makes perfect sense when you trace the road he's walked. He's learned that everything we cling to, money, fame, even life itself, is temporary. None of it truly belongs to us. Eventually it all slips away, leaving only the truth. And Willie Nelson, the last outlaw still standing, has made peace with that truth, singing, smiling, and living proof that even in the face of death, the song never really ends. Fighting against the truth of life and death only brings pain, but accepting it, that's where real freedom begins. The same man who once laid down in the middle of a Nashville street, begging for the pain to end, now faces death with a calm heart and clear eyes, not because he's ready to go, but because he's no longer afraid to live. When you've already lost everything that can be taken from you, what's left is something unbreakable: your soul, your truth, your peace. For Willie Nelson, that's the beauty of it all. The music endures, the love endures, the bonds between people, between hearts, between souls, those never fade. His brutal honesty about facing the end isn't about giving up, it's about understanding. Endings aren't enemies, they're part of the same rhythm that makes beginnings so beautiful. He's watched the people he loved most leave this world. He's seen firsthand that death isn't some monster lurking in the dark. It's simply the last verse in a song that's been playing for 92 unforgettable years. Willie's acceptance of that truth teaches us something deep about courage. Real bravery isn't fighting against the inevitable. It's living fully while knowing the clock is always ticking. And that's exactly what Willie's doing. He's still out there touring, recording, laughing, and singing like every show could be his last. He's not running from death, he's dancing with it. Every performance becomes a love letter to life, every song a final goodbye, every note a gift to the world. He's uncovered a secret most of us spend our whole lives chasing, that the only way to truly live is to make peace with the fact that it all ends someday. Because once you stop fearing the finish line, you can finally enjoy the race. Willie Nelson's journey shows us that acceptance isn't surrender, it's wisdom. His story is a reminder that no matter how dark things get, there's always light waiting to break through. The red-headed stranger has given us his final lesson, that the greatest songs know exactly when to end, and they leave an echo that never dies. If Willie's story touched your heart like it did ours, Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs a little light today. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What part of Willie's journey moved you the most? Thank you for watching, and remember, just like Willie says, we're all only here for as long as we're here. So live loud, love real, and keep the music playing.